immigrants don't talk enough about the pressure of switching from student visa to a work visa, something more permanent. It's just like having you're carrying a weight. Like, okay, no matter what I do, I'm on a clock here. Like this tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. If I don't change this at some point, I have to get up and go home. It's almost like, I think the best way to say it is go get a job or just pack your bags and go home. And Areej really explores that with me, and she talks about the pressure, that weight, that weight on your shoulders. Like, okay, how do I make this more permanent? Let's get into it. I'm excited. And welcome, honestly, welcome. So first of all, I like to say your name is Areeja or Areeja?
Areej.
Areej.
Yeah.
Interesting. What does it mean?
Areej is an Arabic word that means scent of a flower.
Scent of a flower.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It's so interesting how I've started asking people about what their names mean, because I'm like, the beauty of the world and immigration is that you get to meet people from all over the world. And so why don't you take full advantage of that? Well, let's kind of get into the thing. Like, you've been in the UK 10 years now. 10 years?
Mm-hmm. A little over 10 years, yeah.
I'm going to just kind of ask you this question, which is, if you look at it now and look at it then, like, are you the same person who came 10 years ago? What has changed in between you and that person you're looking at now? Like the person who's doing all these massive conferences and stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I moved here when I was 21 and I was still kind of getting to the grips of everything. And I had no idea how long I would end up being here. I think your usual immigrant story is that you kind of move to a country hoping it sticks, but then you don't know if it's going to stick or not. And so I was probably I remember feeling extremely stressed out initially. Just my focus was, how can I make this stick? How can I somehow manage to sort out all of my paperwork and everything in a way where I'm able to turn this into my home? So I think there's still a lot of similarities on how I was then versus how I am now, but I'm probably a lot more, I feel a lot more stable and grounded now because there isn't this, massive lingering thing over your shoulder of, oh no, paperwork, how am I going to make it work out?
Yeah. Just curious, how does that weight feel? Because I was lucky to move to Canada as permanent residency, so it literally just meant that we moved 2021. I had to spend 3 years in the country. So now we're qualified to apply for our passports. So it's pretty straightforward and easy. Yep. But I'm always curious, how does that feel? Like that noise in your head of, okay, I have to. My paperwork is not complete. I need to become a citizen. I need to how does that feel?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure because so I moved here initially on a student visa to do a master's degree, and master's degree in the UK is 1 year. Yeah. And so they give you I think it's a 15-month visa because the program is 12 months and then you have an additional 3 months.
Gosh.
Yeah. And so that's all you have. You have 3 months to either, continue studying. So let's say you want to switch to do a PhD or to switch it to a work visa. And in order for you to switch it to a work visa, you need to get a work sponsor and you need to, be able to, and getting a work sponsor and getting a work visa for someone who I had no work experience because I'd done my bachelor back home in Egypt. And then I came here, did a master's degree. I had no work experience. So I was considered completely junior. So a lot of people tend to save that work sponsorship for people with experience, right? And so I was trying to get sponsored without having any work experience, complete junior. And I remember even the whole year of doing my master's degree, in the back of my mind, it was kind of like this tick tock, yes. Time is running out. But of course, it was very difficult to try. I tried to search. I think I did some internships and stuff just to add some stuff to my CV while I was studying. But it was those 3 months once my dissertation was submitted, everything was done. It was like I have 3 months. I'm either gonna get a job or I'm gonna have to go back home. And I literally oh my god, I did a ridiculous amount of interviews, and in so many of them I would get all the way to the end, but then they'd say, oh, but we don't want to sponsor, we're not going to sponsor, or stuff like that. So it wasn't a problem about getting a job, it was a problem about getting a job with a company that wanted to sponsor you. And I literally switched my student visa to a work visa like a week before my
God.
student visa expired. Like, right. It was, I honestly, I packed my bags by then. I just knew like it wasn't gonna, and then this job just came out of, I remember just being so demotivated, like, because I had to go do the interview in London and I was living in another city, and then I still had to like buy the train tickets, and everything was so expensive and I barely had any money. And I was like, do I even go? I was like, oh, I'm just going to go. Who knows, maybe. And that's the one that ended up working out.
Like, let me just ask you this question. Like, how did it feel when they said we're giving you the job? Like, how did you feel at that point?
Yeah. I think so. So here's the problem. I knew I was getting the job, but I didn't know yet if I was going to get the visa. Like, that's right. Because I get the job offer, but then I have to go apply for a visa switch. And I was so scared something would go wrong for whatever reason. The visa might not be accepted. I don't know. Even though like we tried to do everything by the book. So I think it's like the pressure is even more about, to finally know I got my work visa. I've been granted the work visa. Because it's like I knew I got the job, but it's like, oh no, am I gonna get accepted to get the work visa, which is like a whole other thing. And that's not on the company, that's on, I don't know, UK Border Force.
That's some story. Like 1 week too?
yeah. But the thing is, it's not even right, because you get a work visa and it's amazing, and it's a 3-year work visa, which you can then extend for an additional 2 years, up to 5 years. But if at any point you want to switch your job in the middle, so you want to you want to go to another company, you got another job, whatever, it's the whole process again. You're back again to exactly. You need to find another sponsor. You need to do the paperwork. You need to do another visa. You need for it to be accepted. So it's amazing to get a job that sponsors you, but then you're kind of stuck there, and it becomes very, very, very difficult for you to switch jobs to like a better job or a better company or so on.
Like, has it got any better? Because it feels like people now, like, it feels like they've changed the rules a bit more now, like, because they have all this technician thing. Because I have family there now, and I don't know if they went through all this, but like, it just feels like it's gotten a bit easier for people now.
Actually, from what I am hearing, I think it's actually gotten a lot more difficult. Like,
oh wow,
first of all, it keeps getting more and more expensive. Like, the prices for visa cost and adding your dependents and so on. They introduced something which wasn't there when I first joined, but it came 2 or 3 years afterwards, this immigration health surcharge, which basically means like that you have to, so it's like you pay for, so it's like, let's say there's a 3-year visa, and so you have to pay for this charge in addition. And so I think when they first introduced it, it was like 200, 300 pound a year. Now it's all the way up to like 1,000 to 1,500 a year. So multiply that by how many years your visa is, and then multiply that by, let's say you're a family of 2 or 3, so all of your dependents. Like, the cost is just ridiculous. And then the latest thing as well that they introduced is, I think depending on your job, there are certain jobs which don't allow you to bring family with you, which is, and a lot of them are like in the care industry as well, which is just absolutely, so you want to bring people in to take care of your people, but then you don't want them to bring in their family members. It's just I can't wrap my head around it.
I always say that the UK visa structure is just one of the things that I never really understand. So I just kind of push it at the back of my mind.
It's not great.
But let's kind of go back to the first. If you're open talking about it, like the first week in the UK, like, how did you feel? Because everybody say you were feeling stressed and all. Like, how?
Yeah,
you came alone, right? Or you came just?
I came alone. I'd visited the UK twice before, like on like a student exchange type of thing. Each time it was just for a week, like a very, very short trip. And so I came alone. One of the people I met on the student exchange thing, I'd emailed them, contacted them, and stuff, and they had me stay in their house the first few days, which was so
Yeah.
nice and helpful. And it was so that first week, all I did was I was trying to find a place to stay, a place to rent, and it was so difficult because everything was because I still had no bank account. I still had nothing. And a lot of people were asking if you have like a guarantor. I don't have family. I don't have anyone who lives here. And so the
Gosh.
expectation was then, I think what I ended up agreeing in, I managed to find like this very, very, very small like studio, walking distance from my university, which is great. But I think the only way I could get it was I had to pay 6 months rent in advance. That was the only way that they could agree for, because I had no history, I had no bank account, I had nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I remember that first week being so stressed. Like I arrived, I don't know, on the Saturday or the Sunday, and I was going to start classes like a week later. So I had 1 week of, oh, I need to find a place to live. And I didn't know the system. I didn't understand
Hmm.
anything. Um, and yeah, it was I'm so glad, like I knew, even though I hardly knew her, but she was so like helpful and kind to have me crash in her place until I managed to find a place. But yeah, it's just it was, I think, from I didn't even have any time to enjoy anything, because right away it was like, oh my god, I need to have a
Yeah.
place to live, I need to. And then right away it was like, okay, now I need to open a bank account, now I need to. It was just like this list of, and no one
Yes.
really to kind of guide you or explain to you
Yeah.
what needs to be doing. There was no, and I don't think the internet was that good 10 years ago than it is now. So I wasn't really like connected. I think I met a few people from like this couch surfing website, which I used before or something like that. But it wasn't as easy to kind of, yeah, like you kind of had to figure out a lot of stuff on your own. Definitely very, very, very stressful, and just very like, oh, here's my list of stuff that I need doing. And then the second, I think I moved to a place on the Friday, and then on the Monday right away, like my classes started. Yeah.
Did you ever have a break? I mean, like, was there any time you ever felt like, or like you were just like one?
Yeah. Honestly, that year, it was constantly like this, and it was like I had a set amount of money that I'd come with, and so it was just every month, because there was no income coming in, right? I was there as a student, so it's like that money was just like every month, like going on like rent and food and stuff, and yeah, and it was so stressful. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna run out of money. What am I gonna do? When am I gonna find a job? When am I gonna? And I think there's always this stress as well of like immigrants and people who move to when it feels like there's a limit to the time where you don't travel,
Yes.
you don't do anything, you stay where you are until you figure out how can you make your visa or your time there more longer before you even think about leaving the country, because there's
Yeah.
this like fear of, am I gonna continue, am I gonna be able to come back in?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the internet has made things a lot more better. Like, so
Yeah.
now you can find stuff, but I still think that immigrating is one of the most insane things anyone can do,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it totally resets you. Like, it's full reset. You leave everybody everything every system, and then you just kind of start all over again. And then the crazy part about this is that you see this thing you said about from day one, it feels like you're just on this
Yes.
it's treadmill that keeps increasing with speed at it doesn't slow down. Like, it just
Yeah.
keeps going faster for and I'm like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and I remember that first, because it's almost like I had that deadline, right?
yeah,
I'll either manage to get myself a job offer with a work visa and stay here, or I won't, and I'll have to go back home. And so it was just like everything was like lying on that deadline. And so when you're constantly like, you have that front of mind, and then at the same time I'm doing my studies and I'm trying to, all of that stuff, and it's like there's just this pressure of, either, and then the time just goes by so much quicker when you're like really stressed out about the deadline. Yeah, it was honestly, this is probably, I'm so glad this is behind me now and I can sit and talk about it, because honestly, yeah, yeah,
God, like you're expected to pass well at school. You're
yeah,
expected to deal with all the paperwork that's coming
yeah,
in front of you. You're
yeah,
expected to try and find a job to make some income, because basically you're dealing with transactional issues where, because you take your money you came from your home country, and by the time you convert it to the new country's currency, if you either lose some value in the process, and you're like, okay, this money isn't exactly as I thought it would be. Like,
yeah,
God.
yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about cultural shocks. Like one of the things that kind of hits you that you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Yeah, cultural shocks. I mean, being from Egypt, we have we're very I think probably one of the first shocks was, oh no, why is everything shutting at 5-6 p.m.? Like that for me was everything starts so late over there, because it's a very warm, hot country, and people usually
Yeah.
like they would stay indoors in the morning and start going out. And yeah, I remember being like, what do you mean like the shops and the stuff close at like 5 or 6, or on Sundays, like grocery stuff is like shut. You can't even buy food after 4. And I found that stuff was like so surprising for me, like how that was probably like the first cultural shock. I think the second was like just a complete lack of services. I feel with Egypt or with like countries like that, there's always like everything is very easy and very cheap. If you're thinking about things like, I remember like the first having to go to like a laundromat thing and like wash my clothes. What? How much does how? It's like this stuff is just so readily available and so cheap because there's a lot more people offering tons of services. Um, and yeah, you kind of, I think you start getting used to having to do a lot of stuff on your own, like not
Yeah.
just depending on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was probably like some of my initial cultural shock. The food, UK food, is not the
I
best.
know.
Yeah, I mean, some good stuff though which I mean, good and bad, I guess, in a way. But like how a lot of ready-made food is available,
Yeah.
I found
Yeah.
that surprising. We don't have, which is convenient, but then at the same time probably leads to very unhealthy lifestyles because you
Yeah.
end up kind of relying a lot on that and not cooking. Um, yeah, having stuff like, I don't know, we have like I don't know what equivalent you have in Canada, but something like a Poundland or those types of stores where we're very helpful as a student on a budget, but then at the same time it was so surprising. You end up depending a lot on very, very cheap food, like not unhealthy food because it's cheap. But then I remember being completely surprised by how expensive fruit was, which is like the opposite. Like back home
Yes.
in Egypt, it's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
cheap.
Same in
Yeah,
Nigeria too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was like, what? How can fruit cost this much? So then you don't end up buying it because you're on a budget.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those were probably like some of the things that I found the most surprising initially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all right. Because I used to remember when I had to move then, and I would read stuff about Whole Foods and stuff. I read online and stuff like, oh, this is it's expensive. It's organic. It's expensive. Like it didn't really hit me. Like it didn't register.
Yeah.
And then you move and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why do I have to spend this amount of money to buy fresh food? Like, they're like, oh, it's fresh food, it's organic. I'm like, what is organic? Like, what is organic? Organic is food. Like, is that?
Yeah, we don't exactly. We didn't have any of this. Yeah, this was also new to me. I think also it's probably different now in Egypt, but 10 years ago, when I was in Egypt, most of my transactions, everything was cash. And then when I moved to the UK, it was like this complete, so much, almost everything was being done by card already. And I was
Yeah.
like, what is going? It was it just wasn't something I was used to at all. Like everything being by, yeah. Yeah, that's probably some of the stuff that comes to
By the way,
mind.
I spent some time in Egypt between, this was like 97.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Cairo, then I went to Alexandria.
Yeah, Alexandria is my hometown.
Are you serious? Yeah, I went to Alexandria. Then I went to other small town. I was there for like 6 months. Then I came back.
Oh wow,
Like,
6 months.
yeah.
Yeah. How'd you find it?
I'll tell that story some other day. I went to
Oh
play
no,
soccer.
was it okay? Good or bad? Good or bad?
I loved it, But like I went to play soccer, and someone told me to come. A club invited me because I used to play soccer a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
A club invited me over for trials, and then I went
Yeah.
there. I trained with a couple of the big clubs for a bit, but then I had an agent, and he wanted to use me to do stuff. He wanted me to sign a very ridiculous contract.
Yeah.
I got up, sold my phone, and flew back to Nigeria.
Oh no! Oh no! But you like the country.
Oh yeah, I love the country, and I still resonate what you said about how during the day it's so quiet.
Yes.
It's really
Yes,
hot.
yes.
Like it's hot.
Yes.
Like it's this dry heat. Like it
Yeah.
really bites your skin.
Yeah.
And then from like 4, 5, 6, like
Yeah,
it just feels
everything
like
wakes up.
just explodes, and it's just like a festival of light and colors. And I'm like, what is going on? Don't you guys go to sleep?
Yeah. It's so funny now, whenever I go back home and visit, and let's say like, oh, you know, I go out during the day because I'm used to doing that here. And it's like, well, there is no one. It's like everything is open, but there is no one. It's like completely empty. And then, it's so funny how different that is.
And this question is a bit around. It's cultural shock or not really, but like when you were moving, what did you think UK was going to be like, and what was it really like for you? Like, did you have any preconceived notions, or it was just like, we'll see how it goes?
Yeah. I think I was just so focused on, what's next? I need to do all of this stuff. I have this massive list of things I need to do that I honestly didn't really have. I didn't go in with like a lot of expectations on what it's gonna be like. I guess it was interesting as well going in as a student because it's a little bit different and you can easily connect to people. That I had a lot of international students in my, not from Egypt, but like from different parts of the world. And so it was nice because we all had the very similar experience. And so it was good to kind of connect with one another there, where we all had, the same kind of struggles and worries and stuff. I wonder how different it might be on someone who doesn't go in as a student initially, but goes in directly as work or so forth. I think that might be very different because you don't really have that connections or community or so forth at that point. Like it's probably a lot more, you're kind of going into work somewhere where everyone around you already has that stability. Where at least as a student, international student, you might end up like meeting others who are in a similar, view as you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, actually. Like, so when I talk to people, like there are two trends of thought. There are people that say, "Oh, immigrants, like when you come in, you don't need your community. You just find settling and all that." And there are people who say, "Oh, you need your community because you need that place where you can be yourself without having to code switch, because code switching is exhausting." And I totally understand. I said to people that I think, yet there are people who, because of how they are wired, they just find their way through. But for a lot of people, when you move to a new place, like, or with all the change that is going on, especially if you're older, I would say find some form of your community, because you need that. Like, one is that you're so right. You're right about the point where you say you don't have time to build social capital as much as a student has. You're here, you're in your 30s, or your 40s, or your late 20s, you're working, you show up at the office, everyone there has their circle they've built over time. You're starting afresh, you're learning the cultural nuances, the way they speak, on the unwritten rules of communication. You have to navigate all that. Finding friends, it's extremely difficult at that point in time.
I think it would have been completely, if I'd moved now, like in my current state, it would have been completely different. Back then, like, I was still really young, I was very energetic, I was a student. And then even after I did that first year of student and I went to a job, it was a very, very young agency. Most of us, it was like our first job, So again, it was, even though I wasn't really surrounded by, many people from my community or international folks or so on, it didn't matter because we had a lot of other common things, which is we're all starting our job. There was like that common, thread between us. I think it's so different from if I had moved here in my 30s, let's say, and I was already settled and I had a family and and all of that stuff. And then trying to find my place there, I think that
Yeah.
would be a lot more difficult for sure.
Yeah, it
And
is.
also,
It
it's a
is.
decision that's not that it's even more difficult to make that decision at that point, right? Yeah,
Oh yeah, it
you're
is.
trying to
Because
completely settle down, and you want to uproot your entire.
oh
That's
yeah,
that's
oh
tough.
yeah, oh yeah, it's tough. I mean, because I moved in my 30s, and it's just like you're thinking about a lot. You're thinking about your kids, like oh, like
Yeah,
you need to settle
exactly.
the kids in, like oh,
Yeah.
so you need to find where, like, can you find a place where you're thinking about their school, like oh, I need to
Yeah,
leave somewhere good schools, and you're not thinking about
exactly.
yourself,
There's
like
so
just
much
all
more to think
yeah,
about.
just all those things to think about. Yo, is it close to the hospital just in case the child falls sick so I can just get the child quick to the clinic? I need to find a family doctor because I have to, if it was
Of
just you,
course.
you coast through it. But no, I need a family doctor because like I need to take my kids to doctors every now and then.
Yeah.
You need daycare if you have a kid that hasn't yet gone to school.
Yes. Hmm.
It's like a full project plan, to be honest.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, considering how I have a hypothesis, and this is just talking to you and just listening to other people from the UK, is that the way the UK is structured, it's so easy to get into the survival mentality as a first gen immigrant. Like
Hmm.
it's so easy to get into that. So I'm just curious, like how did you manage to navigate that? Because with what you're doing with WTS, I think like that's super amazing. Like it's like how when they say someone's building something that's going to live beyond them, that's how I see that. And so like,
Oh, I
how
love
did you deal with the survival mentality that allowed you to say to yourself, I'm going to build something bigger than me?
Oh, I love that. I think to be honest, like probably for the longest time, because you're kind of like, on your top game, making sure you continue to be employed, you continue to get that visa and so forth. That finally, so once that 5 years were up, where I switched different jobs and, there was like a lot of changes happening. But once the 5 years were up and I was able to apply to permanent residency, and at that point, once you get permanent residency, you no longer need a sponsor. So you can work
Yeah.
anywhere you want. And it was like, oh my God, the world is my oyster. I can finally work any job or not work. If I wanted to, this thought, we don't really have that. There's no such thing as I can just quit and do nothing for a few
Yeah.
months. No,
No, you can't.
that's not even an
No.
option. You have to always be hired and sponsored by someone. So I think it's almost like I probably wasn't thinking about it at all for during that time. I was so focused on this is my ultimate goal, which is getting permanent residency. And then a year after getting permanent residency, it's getting citizenship, which is even like the bigger goal because when you have a passport like the Egyptian passport, which can be very useless, unfortunately, because oh my God, the struggle of like traveling anywhere, the amount of visas, all of that stuff. So I think once I finally reached that point, I could actually sit down and like breathe and I could think about, well, where do I want to live? Like, do I even want to live here anymore? Who do I want to work with? What do I want to do? Can I finally start thinking about having a family? Because that's another thing as well, where it's like, literally, that was something in my plan where it's like, I don't want to start a family and have a child yet, who will also need to be on a visa when we're not even stable, and I don't even know if we're going to be able to continue living here. So it's like all of this stuff that you kind of put on pause, that once you finally have that paperwork in hand and you're like, oh, I can actually finally start to make decisions for me without being afraid of, is where I am stable enough, or could I just get uprooted the next day and get removed from where I am?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like choices, like gosh.
Yeah, I know. It's honestly, you don't really, it's funny, right? Now that we're sitting and talking about it, you think about some of this stuff, but you, like in your day to day, you don't really, it's exactly what you're saying. It's this survivor mentality, right? It's being really afraid that, oh no, there are redundancies happening in the company. Am I going to get impacted? Because going through redundancy is awful, but going through a redundancy when you have a visa is even worse because it means that you might get removed from the country, right? It's all of this stuff where you're constantly like, it's just, yeah, it's a lot of added pressure for sure. Yeah, yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm always like the mental strength needed to navigate immigration and all the things that come in between it. Like it's a lot. Like I'm always like to everyone who's an immigrant, I'm like, you are amazing because
Oh, yeah,
you are an amazing human being because like
yeah,
everyone sees you are walking around smiling and stuff. No one sees the amount of noise going on in your brain with all the
yeah.
things that you need to tick the
Mm-hmm.
boxes off so that you can now finally say, oh yeah, I'm a bit settled and stuff.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, like I'm a bit settled and stuff. So I think I'm just rounding up right now. For me, the second last question I have for you is like, what do you find most beautiful about your heritage, and which of them have you kept with you so far? Like, do you have kids
Mm.
now?
Yeah, I have a 2-year-old.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, right? Because I mean, she was born as a British citizen, right?
yeah,
And I mean, she has dual nationality because we also got her Egyptian stuff in place as well. But it's there's again, and I guess this is something probably like a lot of immigrants would relate to all the time, where it's like, oh no, how can I make sure that my heritage and culture continues to be passed on to her, especially if she gets raised here, grows up here, meets people here. And it's this constant like struggle of how do I ensure that she feels it, around her in her home and in her. How do we ensure that we're celebrating the things that we want to celebrate and that she feels excited about those? And yeah, it's I think it brings a whole new level of questions. So even after you settle down and all of that stuff and the paperwork is behind you, there is still this constant like, how can I make sure I'm still connected with that? And I think a lot of people do it through even things like food, right? Like that's always something that's can easily be passed on, like recipes you used to enjoy at home and like cooking those at home. And um if you still have family back home, like visiting them and
yeah,
being like connecting in that way. But it's yeah, I think you don't I think if it was just up to me, I probably wouldn't. It would be nice to still have that environment a little bit, but probably it's a big focus point now that I have a child, and I kind of want to make sure she gets to experience some of that. So there's this added pressure of, well, how do I make sure that I pass that on?
yeah. You know, like I say this a lot now, but I'm like, for me, I call immigrants the in-betweeners. That's what I call them now.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
whether we like it or not, so like I have two boys. I tell people that I am Nigerian Canadian because I spent
Yes.
quite some time in Nigeria, then I moved to Canada.
Yeah.
But my kids are Canadian Nigerian. So
Ah.
they are Canada first, Nigeria second.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's for me, once I accept that difference, then it defines the things I do because whether I like it or not, they they might not fully understand it, but they'll never be fully Canadians. Neither will
Yes.
they be fully Nigerians. They'll be somewhere in
Yes.
between that. Like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
they'll just always be because they're raised in a Nigerian parent home. They have Nigerian uncles. The Nigerian grandparents come over every now and then. They haven't gone to Nigeria for a while, but they'll probably go
Yeah.
at some point. You know, they have their dad has Nigerian friends that come around, so they see all that. They eat Nigerian
Yeah.
food, but they live in Canada and they're exposed to the
Yes.
Canadian culture and all those things, and they're growing up
Yes.
here in Canadian schools. So for me, it's like, can I just expose them enough with what's happening back home and all the stuff? Because whether I like it or not, they're just always going to be they'll always be in between the cultures. And
Yes.
so for me, I also think it's a strength, is because you can say to yourself that you can take the good parts of both sides,
Of
meld it
course.
together, and create like an individual who's very different from the world
Yeah. Of course.
as is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. That's such a great way of putting it. Yeah. And you're right. Like when you describe it this way, it's like, yeah, I definitely resonate as like as an Egyptian British. But actually, when
Hmm.
I think about my child is British Egyptian. Like
Egyptian.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. So I think the last question I have for you is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight?
Anything I would have done differently in hindsight? Oh my god! I think the first. I mean, I just wish I enjoyed my time a little bit more. To be honest, I think that's whatever is meant to be, right? And we like in the back of my mind, I know that, and it's like, oh, if it's meant for me to live here, then I will live here. If it's not, it's not. But I was so focused on trying so hard to be in control the whole time of making it work out that there's so much so much I didn't enjoy. I did enjoy my uni years. I did enjoy my first few years of working. I did enjoy. There was always like this stress of what's next, what's next, what's next, and I couldn't just sit back and like enjoy, just enjoy. And I never celebrate any of my success at all, because it's always like what's next, right? And so I think that's probably like in hindsight, if there was, I just wish I could have like, taken a bit of a breather and just kind of enjoyed the present a little bit more, and enjoyed the experiences I was having and the people I was surrounded by, and just made the most out of, as opposed to constantly thinking about the future and what if and what's going to happen and so on.
Yeah. And thanks for that reminder. I'll take that to myself too.
Yeah. It's honestly such a reminder. We need to always, and I mean, I'm still not great at doing that, but when I think about those, all I remember was being so stressed out, constantly planning, trying to apply for this, trying to do this, and never just being like, you know what, I'm just gonna have a good day today. I'm just gonna enjoy this. I'm not.
Yeah, to be honest, that's so true. Because you're right. Like it's because you feel like you're on the clock, and I mean, I don't blame anyone. Like because you feel like you're on the clock. You feel like you have things that you need to do.
Yeah,
you're not sure of your future, so all those things just come, and it becomes so hard to say, okay, I'm just going to enjoy the present moment, because really the present moment, there's no problem. It's just me in this moment. But then that's so hard to see.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Areej. Thank
you for having me. This was, I mean, honestly, like, because people don't really talk about this. And no one talks about this. Like, and I love that you're doing this, and I love that you're hosting all these different people to kind of like share their experiences and stuff. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, like, that's the idea. Like, we feel like we go through this, and then we just kind of suppress it all the way down inside us.
Yeah.
And then everyone talks about the checklist and the formulas. But I'm like, no, like the story, the lessons that we the story, because that's when you learn how to approach it.
And also, I don't know if I think about myself 10 years ago, like if I was listening to this while I was feeling like very demotivated, if I was listening to these different stories being shared, it would have given me a little bit of hope of,
yes.
But we don't, as you said, like we don't really talk about it, we just kind of get on with stuff. And like this, I really hope that, some of these episodes and what we're putting together reaches people who might currently be feeling like really demotivated and unsure of, how things are going to turn out to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was such a beautiful episode too. Areej is a fantastic person. She's a lady I look up to a lot. If you enjoy this, please like, share, comment. We appreciate all of that. YouTube, Substack, Spotify, podcast. Please share with someone. Give it a full listen. And if you know someone who we should talk to, who's an immigrant, who has a story, please send them our way. We're always looking for videos. Thank you so much.